The next 2 weeks on Days of Our Lives may look like a collection of separate stories at first: relationship trouble, family secrets, romantic tension, and DiMera power games. But the deeper you look, the more it feels like Salem is moving toward a chain reaction. Because this is not just a spoiler period about surprise returns and emotional reunions. This is a stretch where old wounds may reopen, buried truths may become impossible to contain, and several characters may realize that what they thought was stable is actually starting to fall apart. One of the most emotionally layered stories in this preview may be the growing tension between Stephanie and Alex. At first glance, their conflict could sound like a familiar soap setup. A couple argues, emotions flare, and someone storms out. But this situation may be operating on a much deeper level, because Stephanie is not reacting from a place of ordinary frustration. She is still living with the emotional aftershocks of everything she has endured, and that changes the meaning of even small moments between them. In a healthier moment, it might have come across as sweet or romantic. But for someone still carrying trauma, being startled can feel less like affection and more like a loss of control. And if the show leans into that emotional reality, then this is not really a story about Alex making one bad move. It is about how fragile Stephanie's sense of safety may still be, even when she is with someone who cares about her. If Stephanie walks away from Alex and ends up finding comfort in Jeremy Horton's arms, the key issue may not be romance at all. It may be emotional retreat. A move toward the person or place that feels safest when everything else starts to feel overwhelming. In that kind of moment, decisions are not always about love. Sometimes they are about relief, escape, or emotional survival. Alex may believe he is trying to repair the relationship, while Stephanie may already feel like she is protecting herself from a pressure he does not even realize he is creating. When one person is trying to reconnect and the other is trying not to unravel, even a seemingly minor conflict can open the door to much bigger damage. Which is exactly why the timing of Joy's return could not be worse. Just as Alex and Stephanie seem to be entering a more unstable phase, Joy Wesley's comeback threatens to push the story into much more dangerous territory. And the real power of this twist may lie in when it happens. Joy is not returning to a couple that feels solid. She is coming back at a point when Stephanie and Alex already appear emotionally off balance, when trust may be thinning out, and when unresolved tension is already sitting beneath the surface. That means Joy may not simply arrive with a problem. She may arrive as proof that the relationship was already far more vulnerable than either of them wanted to admit. Since Joy left town pregnant with Alex's baby, her reappearance carries immediate emotional consequences. If she shows up with an infant, then the issue becomes bigger than shock value. Suddenly, Alex is not just dealing with an old chapter reopening. He may be forced to confront a living, permanent reality that changes every conversation going forward. And for Stephanie, that could be devastating in a completely different way. Because the pain here may not come only from Joy's return itself. It may come from what that return makes impossible to ignore. How much Alex shared, how much Stephanie understood, how long this unresolved situation has been hovering over their future without ever fully disappearing. If something from the past is about to resurface, then Joy may not be the source of the collapse. She may simply be the trigger that reveals how many unanswered questions were left sitting in the dark. And once that kind of truth steps back into the room, relationships rarely go back to the version they were pretending to be. Compared to the romantic chaos elsewhere in Salem, Theo's material could easily be underestimated at first. Trivia night at the pub sounds casual. Gabby, Philip, Theo, and Jada in the same setting sounds social, even playful. But this may be one of those classic Days situations where a seemingly lighter setup is hiding a much more serious emotional current underneath. Because Theo's real focus may not be the evening at all, Even if there is an undercurrent of attraction where Gabby is concerned, that feels secondary next to what is weighing on him emotionally. Lexi's survival appears to be the true center of gravity in this story, and the fact that Theo is carrying a secret connected to Abe immediately changes the tone. When a character is holding back information tied to a loved one's condition, that almost always signals that the real fallout has not started yet. It means Theo may already know something that could deeply affect the people around him, and the longer he keeps that truth contained, the more pressure the story builds. Confiding in Marlena suggests this secret has reached a point where Theo cannot manage it internally anymore. He needs a place to say it out loud. He needs someone who can absorb the emotional weight of it without immediately detonating the lives around him. That alone tells us this is not a passing concern or a minor update. It is something serious enough to change the emotional landscape once it finally comes out. And that possibility becomes even more intriguing when you connect it to the larger chaos building elsewhere. If Lexi truly is nearing a real awakening, then the show may be setting up one of those perfectly timed soap disruptions where private schemes, public family drama, and buried emotional truths all collide at once. In that scenario, Theo's secret is not just a personal burden. It may become the detail that turns another major Salem event completely upside down. Chad DiMera's return during the week of April 20 through 24 feels important for more than the obvious reason. Yes, this is Connor Floyd's debut in the role, so there is already natural curiosity around how the show will reintroduce Chad. But the real strength of this return may come from where the character is stepping back into the story. Because Chad is not walking into a clean emotional slate. He is returning to Salem with unfinished personal history still hanging in the air, and that gives his comeback immediate tension. The expected reunion with Cat Green already carries a built-in awkwardness. There are unresolved feelings there, complicated memories there, and likely a lingering uncertainty about what that connection was supposed to mean, or what it still might mean now. That alone would be enough to give Chad a messy re-entry. But the show seems to be complicating it even further by placing Belle in the frame almost at once. That detail matters. If Chad is already thinking about the date he promised Belle, then his return may not simply be about reconnecting with the past. It may be about being pulled in two emotional directions before he has even had time to fully settle back into Salem. One path carries unresolved history. The other may represent a new possibility. And putting Chad between those two energies so quickly gives his comeback a much sharper dramatic edge. It may be the start of a personal reset that immediately becomes emotionally messy, forcing Chad to confront not only where he has been, but where he wants to go next. And in soap terms, that kind of uncertainty is often where the strongest character material begins. But Chad's return may not stay personal for long. Because the moment he steps back into Salem, he also steps back into the DiMera orbit, and that family already seems dangerously close to another internal explosion. If the next 2 weeks have one storyline that feels primed for a major rupture, it is the pressure building around EJ and the DiMera family. What makes this story so effective is that the danger is coming from multiple directions at once. On one side, Kristen is actively strategizing with Sophia, and that immediately gives this plot a more personal, vindictive energy. This does not feel like routine DiMera scheming for business advantage. It feels targeted, it feels deliberate, and most importantly, it feels designed to hit EJ somewhere emotionally vulnerable. That is where Johnny becomes crucial. If Kristen and Sophia are planning to use Johnny as the path to EJ's downfall, then this story could become far more painful than a standard family power struggle. Because once a revenge plan starts running through a parent-child connection, the damage becomes harder to contain. It stops being about outmaneuvering someone. It becomes about destabilizing their emotional center. At the same time, EJ appears ready to move ahead with Stefano's will reading once Chad is home, and that decision says a lot about how he sees the moment. From EJ's point of view, the will reading may be meant to project authority. It may be his way of restoring structure, reclaiming control, and reasserting DiMera order at a time when too many moving pieces are beginning to circle around him. In theory, it is the kind of event that should strengthen his position. But Days of Our Lives rarely lets moments like that stay controlled for long. That is why this setup feels so loaded. A will reading in Salem is never just a legal formality. It is usually a trapdoor, a stage for buried resentments, hidden agendas, and family fractures that are waiting for the worst possible moment to surface. So if Lexi wakes up, if Theo's secret starts affecting the wider canvas, or if Kristen's plan gains momentum at exactly the wrong time, then Stefano's will reading could become the precise moment EJ loses the grip he thinks he still has. And that is what makes this material especially compelling. EJ may believe he is organizing the family around a moment of power. But the story may actually be building toward the opposite outcome, a public unraveling where control turns into exposure, authority turns into vulnerability, and the DiMera family once again becomes the architect of its own chaos. Because whether we are talking about Alex and Stephanie, Theo and Lexi, Chad and Belle, or EJ and the rest of the DiMeras, the same tension keeps showing up again and again. People are trying to manage situations that may already be slipping beyond their control. Not because every twist will explode immediately, but because the emotional pressure is building in almost every corner of Salem at once. Relationships are weakening, secrets are getting heavier, returns are arriving at the worst possible moment. And more than one character may be about to discover that the future they imagined is no longer the one they are heading toward. So as Days of Our Lives moves through April 13th to April 24th, the real question may not be who gets the biggest shock. It may be who is still standing when all of these stories finally collide.